Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping onto a moon-washed road outside Chang'an, the last bright gate before the long, strange west. The story you're about to travel with isn't just folklore. It's a braid of history, satire, and soul work. In the 7th century, a real monk named Xuanzang walked deserts and ice to bring Buddhist texts back to China. Almost 1,000 years later, a Ming novelist gathered temple tales, street comedy, and a nation's dreams, and stitched them into Journey to the West, where the gentle pilgrim Xuanzang, Tripitaka, walks beside a chaos-taming trickster, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, a hungry, hilarious ex-marshal, Zhu Bajie, Pigsy, and a river-scarred guardian, Sha Wu Jing, Sandy, with a white dragon prince, serving penance as their horse. Think of it as a road movie with demons, dharma, and the occasional cosmic HR intervention. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing the map light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shoulder a travel bag that isn't entirely yours. Inside are scriptures you hope to earn, doubts you can't quite name, and snacks you absolutely did not promise to share with Pigsy. The city's lanterns fall behind. Ahead, the road unrolls like a ribbon, across fields and rivers and mountains that don't know your name yet. On your left, Wukong spins his iron staff, today no thicker than a chopstick, tomorrow a pillar that props up the sky. Quirky note, tradition says the staff weighs 13,500 catties, which is another way of saying, please don't ask to borrow it. On your right, Pigsy jogs with the stubborn grace of a man who swore he wasn't hungry 10 minutes ago. Behind you, Sandy's prayer beads clack like a metronome for patience. In front, the monk's steps have the fragile courage of a candle walking through wind. Here's your first quiet history point, tucked like a pebble in your shoe. Journey to the West grew from a real scholarly mission. Xuanzang studied at places like Nalanda in India and returned with hundreds of texts, changing the map of East Asian Buddhism. The novel turns that scholarship into mythic theater, Buddhism's compassion, Taoism's shape-shifting freedom, and folk religion's very practical, problem-solving, all pile into the same cart. Scholars still debate who exactly wrote the final form. It's often attributed to Wu Chang'an, and how much of it is spiritual allegory versus social satire. You don't have to decide tonight, you only have to walk. You notice how the world around you is double exposed. Every roadside shrine is also a mind. Every monster, a metaphor with teeth. The first temple bell you hear lands somewhere between your ribs. The second one answers from a place behind your eyes. Wukong learned his fiery golden eyes in a furnace, literal fire, spiritual vision. Pigsy's 9-toothed rake is a joke, until a cliff needs scaling or an ego needs combing. Sandy, with his river-worn calm, notices weather before it's weather. Tripitaka's headband spell tightening when the monkey gets unruly is many things at once. Comic gadget, mercy break, and the quiet reminder that strength without direction is just noise. You pass a milestone carved with a few cramped characters distance to the next county, and realize you've also passed a softer one. You've agreed to walk even when you don't feel epic. That's the paradox at the heart of this tale. The Monkey King can vault 10,000 miles in a somersault, but the only distance that counts is the step you're willing to take right now, in sandals that rub, with companions who talk too loudly when you're tired. A thin fog collects along the ditches. Crickets start their careful work. Somewhere in the murk, a trader's cart rattles, and you smell roasted chestnuts, and the kind of luck that belongs to people who go to bed early. Wukong leans close, eyes bright. Master, he whispers, which, tonight means you. Do you want the short way, or the instructive way? Pigsy votes for the short way, obviously. Sandy shrugs, which means he knows there's only one way, the one that asks something from you. Small interaction for you, traveler at home in your own room. Which companion feels closest to your nature tonight? Clever, like Wukong, craving like Pigsy, steady like Sandy, or tender like Tripitaka? There's no wrong answer. You're allowed to be all four, just not at the same time. A bat skims the road's invisible ceiling. The moon balances on a branch, and for a second, the shadow it casts looks like a script you almost remember from a dream. You think of Xuanzang copying sutras by lamplight, of a novelist centuries later turning that discipline into comedy and thunder. You think softly that maybe the monsters are helpful. They make you choose. They make you practice. They make you laugh when you realize the thing you feared at noon is just a cardboard lion under the stars. The road dips, water flashes. Wukong taps the stream with his staff, and it purls like a harp. Pigsy, of course, asks if there's a ferry. Sandy wades without comment. Tripitaka closes his eyes for a breath, then another, as if listening for a bell you can't hear yet. You don't mind. Some bells only ring for people who have promised to carry them. Behind you, the city is a low red ember. Ahead, the night opens like a book you're not sure you can read. But reading isn't the point. Walking is. If you're waiting for the moment when you will feel ready, spoiler, it doesn't come. The moment that comes is smaller and better. You adjust the strap on your bag, clear your throat like a vow, and put your heel down on the next square of dirt. Somewhere just off the road, a demon is practicing its polite smile. Somewhere farther on, a bodhisattva is practicing an even kinder one. Between them is you, carrying a question like a lantern with no handle. What does it take to carry a miracle without dropping it? The answer is not urgent. We'll find it by walking. For now, listen to the beads, the bell, the breath. The night is long, the company improbable, and the west, well, the west will be there in the morning. The road leaves the last tea stall and becomes an argument between two hills. Wukong kicks a pebble. It skips ahead like a scout. Pigsy eyes a gourd of water like it owes him money. Sandy does what Sandy does best, turns breathing into leadership. Tripitaka folds his palms, and you, yes, you, feel your spine do the same. It's not holiness, it's posture, learning a quieter grammar. History tucks itself into the hedges here. In the real 7th century, Xuanzang slipped out of Chang'an against a travel ban, crossed the Gobi by moon, math and well rumors, and studied at Nalanda for years. He returned with some 657 texts, became a translator whose footnotes outlived kings, and raised the floor of East Asian philosophy. The novel tips the table. It recasts imperial paperwork as heavenly edict, turns border guards into ogres with HR problems, and gives the monk 3 companions who are basically your browser tabs: Chaos, Wukong, Cravings, Pigsy, and Consequences, Sandy. Scholars still debate how much of Journey to the West is straight sermon, and how much is stand-up. The safest answer is both, which is also how paradoxes like to dress. At the fork, a stone stele leans like an elderly librarian. One arrow is chipped but legible. Shortcut. The other is tenderly carved. Safe passage. Longer. Wukong squints at the sky, then at you. Pigsy coughs in the universal language of, "Short please." Sandy shrugs, which in Sandy is practically a paragraph. Tripitaka looks around for a bell no one else can hear. You're tempted by the shortcut because you are a mammal with finite patience. Consider this your first training. Meaning often lives in the slow lane with its blinker politely on. A bell does ring tinny, insistent from a roadside shrine to Guanyin. The fragrance of sandalwood folds the air. Wukong bows like he's remembering old homework. He learned his 72 transformations after sneaking into cosmic school, you recall. Quirky note. His somersault cloud is said to leap 108,000 li in a blink, which is an ancient way of saying everywhere, immediately, and yet here he is, walking. If the fastest hero in classical fiction can agree to sandals, your to-do list can probably survive a slower Tuesday. Tripitaka unwraps a simple Karsaya robe, patched and sun-mended, and sets it before the shrine, as a promise to keep going even when the going is sticky with weather and opinions. Pigsy pretends not to tear up. He fails. Sandy places a bead on the offering stone. The bead is river-worn and looks like it remembers a flood you've only read about. Wukong taps his staff once, lightly, and for a heartbeat, the grain of the wood looks like a map. While you're thinking about maps, here's an odd one. The novel insists on 81 calamities 9 times 9, the square of the highest single digit, a numerology flex that says perfection is earned in increments. Historians will tell you 9 is imperial. 2. Robes, ranks, drums, tears. The book takes that bureaucracy and re-enchants it. Every stamped form becomes a monster. Every approval, a blessing. Every rejection, a lesson you had to learn the petable way. The shortcut looks increasingly like a dare. A wind tumbles down the left path, cool and a little sweet, like pears left in snow. The right path offers no special effects, only elbow room. Tripitaka nods toward the long way, which annoys Pigsy at a cellular level. Wukong says nothing but his ears tilt, which is how you can tell the trickster agrees with the monk. Nothing that's truly yours rushes you. Two children appear by the shrine with a basket of roasted chestnuts and the scientific optimism of small merchants. They ask if the great immortal, that's Wukong, wants to trade one magic trick for a snack. Wukong flips the staff between thumb and pinky until it becomes a hairpin, then a toothpick, then a mast that would embarrass a navy, then back again. He hands them a secret, a single golden hair. Drop it in water, he says, and it becomes a fish that knows the way home. The kids stare the way kids stare when the world says, by the way, wonder still exists. You shoulder your bag and choose the longer path. It takes exactly 3 steps for the air to change. Somewhere in the brush a voice says master in a tone that wants to sell you something. A fox spirit emerges, impeccably polite, offering to guide the party through a shortcut hidden inside a shortcut. You've met this fox before. It has had many usernames. Wukong smiles with all his teeth and none of his patience. Tripitaka thanks the fox and declines. Pigsy clutches the chestnuts like a treaty. Sandy shifts his beads from one hand to the other, and the fox decides it has urgent business in a different chapter. Here's your interactive moment. When your day splits fast and flashy versus slow and honest, what do you usually pick? And why? No shame. The point isn't to be virtuous, it's to be conscious. Write yourself a 1-sentence field note. The road loves readers. The hills open like a book that forgot to end. You walk through terraces of millet that comb the wind with a farmer's patience. A grandmother on a doorstep threads a needle without looking, because her hands have practiced this more times than numbers care to count. Pigsy sidles over and volunteers to carry the basket, if the basket happens to contain dumplings. It doesn't, he carries it anyway. That's growth. A debate corner for your inner scholar. Some interpreters say Tripitaka is satire, a jab at timid bureaucracy, while others insist he is the beating heart of compassion, the one who keeps the team from becoming a traveling demolition company. The text allows both readings, then grins while you argue with yourself. It's as if the author believed people are mixed drinks, one part courage, one part caution, stirred by weather. Dusk discovers you. A heron draws a slow silver line across a low sky. Someone up the valley bangs a pot to call children home. Wukong's eyes, those fiery golden eyes born in a furnace, catch a spark out on the moor campfire or trap. He whistles to the nearby reeds. The reeds whistle back, which in this neighborhood means both. The group halts. Tripitaka breathes. Wukong twirls the staff to the size of a door hinge, just enough, not more. Pigsy whispers a prayer that sounds suspiciously like a menu. Sandy steps half a pace forward, and the world remembers it can be kind. There's a logic here you can feel but not quite phrase. Hurry is loud, meaning is quiet. The stele at the fork wasn't a map so much as a mirror. The calm you're seeking isn't at the end of the road. It's the way you place your foot on the next stone. If the myth has a secret curriculum, it's this. Practice choosing in small, repeatable ways, and the big choices begin to choose you back. The campfire ahead turns out to be 3 farmers boiling sweet potatoes and telling the kind of jokes that have survived every dynasty because they are true enough to be funny and gentle enough to be shared. They make room. Tripitaka thanks them. Wukong keeps an eye on the hedgerow where the fox is definitely pretending to be a bush. Pigsy laughs like a man whose day is ending in carbohydrates. Sandy passes the kettle without spilling a single star. You sit. The first potato is too hot to hold and somehow perfect anyway. The road is still long, but your breath has learned a new trick. It stays. The night unbuttons one more button. You think, not for the last time, that the quickest way to the west might be the way that remembers you are not a machine. Morning peels the dark like an orange. The farmers wave you on with sweet potato warmth still in their palms. The path tilts toward a low ridge where the wind edits your thoughts into shorter sentences. Tripitaka thanks the wind anyway. Wukong spins his staff once, listening. Pigsy spins his stomach once, complaining. Sandy carries the quiet like a well-made tool. Down in the hollow sits a compound with red eaves and a nameboard that says Pine Crane Monastery, in the brushstrokes of someone who believed in straight lines. A bell marks your arrival with the confidence of a well-fed gong. The abbot glides out in slippers so silent you hear the rules arriving before he does. "Travelers," he smiles, and the smile has paperwork in it. "Please, enter. Tea if you are wise, porridge if you are wiser." History footnote in Human Voices. In the Tang, monasteries often doubled as hostels for pilgrims and messengers. There were also relay posts, Yizhan spaced a day's ride apart, where officials swapped horses and rumors. Some of those registers survive in the Dunhuang caves, guest books full of names, trades, and notes like "arrived with dust, left with rice." Scholars still debate whether Journey to the West gently teases that system, bureaucracy dressed as piety, or praises it, piety dressed as organization. The book, being a book, says yes. You cross the threshold and the world performs its old trick. Hospitality drifts in. Appraisal sits already at the table. Wukong's fiery golden eyes dim to polite embers. Pigsy bows just low enough to smell the porridge. Sandy notes the exits, then pretends he didn't. Tripitaka folds his hands and gives the abbot the kind of gratitude that makes a room stand up straighter. Inside, the main hall holds a guanyin with a face like good weather. Beside the statue hangs a wooden fish drum, lacquer cracked by years of dawns. A boy monk offers tea so green it makes your hunger behave. On the far wall, a mural shows a river coiling past 9 mountains. If you stare long enough, it becomes a map of your mood. The abbot produces a guest register with pages ribbed by thumb memory. "Names," he says, "and purpose." Wukong scratches Courier of Scriptures because he likes a title with elbows. Pigsy hesitates, then writes logistics, which is not untrue. Sandy writes nothing and still communicates so much. Tripitaka writes only his courtesy name with a humility that would make a mountain apologize. Lunch is a study in steam. Rice that respects itself, greens that remember rain, tofu that was brave in a previous life. The abbot asks about your route. Wukong answers with weather and understatements. Pigsy answers with adjectives and refills. Sandy nods in that way. That means, you may proceed. Tripitaka speaks of Nalanda as if it were a house you can still see from here. Halls of debate, courtyards where questions cooled in shade, teachers who could fold a doctrine until it fit a child's hand. Obscure tidbit for your pocket. Some texts say Xuanzang returned with a relic bowl that left no shadow in certain light, a metaphor dressed as a magic trick. Others mention flying cash, fake yarn paper drafts, merchants used to move value safer than coin, early evidence that ideas travel better than metal. The novel knows this in its bones. You can send a message faster than a body, but a body learns what a message forgets. The abbot's smile wobbles when he thinks no one is watching. Wukong is watching. He notices the side hall with incense but no ash, the prayer beads that shine more from handling than prayer, the 3 novices who keep glancing at a door that looks painted shut. In folk stories, demons love 2 disguises, foxes and monks. Wukong's tale, if he had one, would be very still. After lunch, the abbot suggests you hear the velvet on the suggestion that the travelers rest in the east wing. The west wing is for lay benefactors, he says, and the way he says benefactors could bribe itself. Tripitaka accepts the east without bargaining. Pigsy asks whether the west wing has snacks. Sandy looks at Wukong. Wukong has put away his smile and taken out his certainty. In the east wing, the cots are modest, the windows polite, the silence practiced. Wukong picks a splinter from the lattice and whispers to it. It becomes a hare, then becomes 3 hares, then becomes 3 small monkeys, who are excellent at hiding behind assumptions. "Keep watch," he tells them. They nod with professional pride. Your interactive nudge. When you step into a room that's warm on the surface but off-key underneath, which part of you speaks first, your craving to belong, your itch to flee, or your curiosity to understand? You don't need to fix that part today. Just notice which voice reaches for the pen. Evening practice. In the courtyard, monks strike the wooden fish, voices lifting like lanterns. Tripitaka joins, tone steady, a thread you could hang a bridge from. Pigsy hums along at a volume better suited to festivals. Sandy keeps the beat with his breath. Wukong walks the cloister and learns who isn't tired and why. History peaks again. In real monasteries, sutra recitations often followed a painstaking rhythm, slow enough to memorize, steady enough to share. The novel turns that rhythm into a spell against chaos. Scholars still debate whether the Monkey King's discipline arc mirrors a monk's training in disguise. Wild mind, yoked by mantra, power invited to kneel so compassion can stand. Night rolls in on soft wheels. The abbot returns with smiles sharpened into offers. Our blessed West Wing has benefactors who delight in uncommon guests, he says. One small meeting, a little wine, a donation to ease your miles. Wukong's staff elongates by an inch, the threat level of a meter stick. Tripitaka thanks the abbot and declines again, this time with a bow that could extinguish a quarrel. The abbot's pupils do a weather change. The three little monkeys slip back with intel. The West Wing glows without lamp, and the benefactors smell faintly of iron and storm. Pigsy squeezes his ladle like a talisman. Sandy steps half sideways, interposing calm between problem and monk. Wukong knocks the staff once on stone, and somewhere in the compound, something decides to be honest. Doors open that were pretending not to exist. Figures in brocade step out with teeth like good fences. Their voices are sweet as syrup and wrong as sand in tea. Reverend, they say to Tripitaka, we only want a blessing, which, translated into monster, sometimes means a bite. Wukong smiles the way thunder smiles before it remembers its line. The abbot misplaces his hospitality. No gore tonight, just choreography. Wukong's staff sketches a circle the size of safety. Pigsy blocks with the discourteous efficiency of a man protecting dinner. Sandy turns one attacker with a pivot that teaches gravity manners. Tripitaka chants, and the chant is not a weapon, it is a mirror. When the sound touches brocade, brocade remembers it was stolen thread. The figures stutter, flicker, and reveal themselves as fox spirits fat on flattery. Even the abbot shrinks 2 inches in conscience. Quirky note, some commentaries claim demon episodes satirize predatory patronage, the way religious institutions could drift into cozy arrangements with money and power. Others say demons are simply the appetites that want to eat your vows. Either way, Wukong escorts the foxes to the gate with firm courtesy. Tripitaka bows to the abbot, who bows deeper, which is a sentence in a language where apologies are furniture you sit on for a while. You bed down with the smell of sesame oil and lessons. Pigsy snores in 4/4 time. Sandy dreams in landscapes. Wukong keeps watch from the roof, where the stars are behaving, and the wind signs its name on the tiles. Tripitaka sleeps, as if gratitude were a pillow you could refill. You, too, settle aware that some places feed you, and some places feed on you, and the first skill of a pilgrim is learning the difference before the porridge cools. Dawn lifts the monastery like a lid. Steam from the kitchen knits the last bits of night into breakfast. The abbot bows so low he nearly apologizes to the floorboards. Tripitaka returns the bow with the gentle precision of a needle finding its thread. Pigsy pockets 2 sesame cakes in the universal language of for later. Sandy shoulders the luggage with a kindness that never brags. Wukong taps his staff once pure punctuation, and you step back onto the road while the bell counts your steps like a friendly accountant. The path braids through pines, then loosens into scrub where cicadas work their tiny looms. In the distance, a valley squares itself with a city gate and 2 stone lions the size of strong opinions. The plaque reads, Paper City Pass. Somebody here likes rules enough to name a gate after them. Smoke rises in bureaucratic columns. You can smell soy, ink, and ambition. History wanders in disguised as scenery. The Tang loved order. Couriers carried tallies and passes. Checkpoints asked not just, who are you, but who vouches for you. Even monks often traveled with letters of introduction from abbots to abbots, stamped with red, that looked like small sunsets on paper. Some real passes from Dunhuang list pilgrims by trade, scribe, singer, seller of brushes, because the empire didn't just count bodies, it counted possible usefulness. Scholars still debate whether that neatness protected highways or merely decorated them. At the gate, an official with eyebrows disciplined into parallel lines raises a wooden tablet. Names and purpose, he says, in the tone of a man who has loved a queue, and been loved back. Tripitaka smiles, folds his palms, and answers with the softness of a bowl held in two hands. Westward to the Thunderclap Monastery, he says, for scriptures that wash dust from the mind. The official nods, then looks past Tripitaka at Wukong, Pigsy, and Sandy the way a cat regards important furniture. Escort permits? He asks. Monk's protection, Wukong says, tapping the staff. Old policy. The official considers Wukong's fur, Pigsy's ears, Sandy's necklace of skull beads, ethically sourced, spiritually symbolic, and fails to find the correct shelf for them in his inner filing cabinet. Please wait, he says, which in many languages means an interesting delay approaches. Under the awning, merchants audition for passage, with offers and smiles. Pigsy makes friends with a vendor of scallion pancakes at a speed that implies destiny. Sandy studies the lions. Not jade, he murmurs, local granite. But look at the polish on the paws. Wukong doesn't look at the paws. He looks at the paper charms pasted under the lion's chins, fresh, bright, and placed by a hand that feared more than thieves. Your small, timely question. When a system asks you for proof of goodness, which do you reach for first? A document, a performance, or a person who knows your name? Notice which instinct steps forward before your values clear their throat. The official returns with a satin-robed deputy whose hat could serve tea. Regrettably, says the deputy, the West Road is closed for spiritual renovations. Demons, but with paperwork. Only the well-certified may pass. A donation might help sanctify the process. His smile contains arithmetic. Wukong scratches behind his ear, a gesture that could mean thought or the prelude to theatre. He whispers to a hair, and the hair becomes a crimson seal, engraved with characters so elegant they could balance on a single brush bristle. He slaps it onto the guest register. The seal glows like a coal remembering its childhood. The deputy's eyes widen in a dialect you do not need to translate. Obscure tidbit, gift-wrapped. Some Tang offices used flying seals' spare chops kept for emergencies when the main seal was far away with the prefect or the governor. They were controversial, practical, but easily abused. A few are mentioned in colophons from frontier posts. Scholars still argue whether such seals democratized authority or just multiplied creative mischief. The novel, being mischievous, gives Wukong one that answers to compassion first and chain of command second. Ah, the deputy says, adjusting his hat into a more respectful angle. The monastic courier seal of the Western Road. He has never heard of it, but it sounds real enough to obey. Yet the lions do not blink stone eyes, they shiver. The paper charms crisp, curl, and drop like leaves. The deputy's smile flips to a frown sown with fear. We pasted those last night, he whispers. The lion's spirits have been restless. And then, the gate breathes. The granite ripples in heatless heat. Ink begins to bleed from the seams of the lion's jaws, smearing the characters stuck there. Tripitaka steps forward. Gentle guardians, he says to stone. Yes, but perhaps also to duty and to thresholds. We ask only passage, and we promise to leave less dust than we bring. His voice is a rope that remembers how to hold. The right lion exudes a sound like a stamp pressed too hard. From its mouth slides a scroll that writes itself while falling. Long sigils, loops, names that look accusatory even before you can read them. The left lion answers with a breath of cold ink that darkens the deputy's shoes. Wukong plants the staff, and the air behaves. These aren't lions, he says kindly. They're fears that learned calligraphy. He strikes the ground. The ink stands up as paper soldiers folded men, with sharp creases and rules for smiles. They advance with the courage of forms in triplicate. No gore, only origami. Pigsy windmills his rake like a windmill that found purpose. Sandy sweeps wide, turning rows into confetti. Wukong touches each folded soldier with the staff, and each becomes a passport stamped returned to sender. Tripitaka chants not to drive anything away, but to remind it of its original job, protect, not imprison. The lions exhale chalk and regret. The scroll snips itself into gentle bookmarks. History steps in with a moral in disguise. Empires build gates to filter. Religion builds gates to focus. Sometimes, by accident or appetite, both kinds of gate prefer control. Scholars still debate whether Journey to the West mocks this habit with lion puppets, or blesses it by giving those puppets a conscience. Wukong, practical as rain, simply reassigns the puppets to better work. The deputy collapses into apologies, the official into gratitude, the merchant into sales. Pigsy returns the pancake stall to solvency. Sandy wipes black smudges from the lion's paw with a tenderness that might surprise you if you hadn't been watching him all along. Tripitaka bows to the gate, not the people, not the stone, but the idea of passage done well. Before you go, Wukong tucks one paper soldier into your sleeve. For your next checkpoint, he says, remember, some rules are bridges, some are nets. Learn which. A small folk fact to keep. Many city gates in old China housed drums to announce danger, and gongs to announce visitors. Some had niches where beggars could sleep out of the wind. A few had small shrines to gate gods, whose job was half spiritual, half civic. It wasn't always clear who protected whom. It still isn't. The road beyond Paper City widens into a plain where geese practice punctuation. Wukong walks lighter now that no one has tried to certify his heartbeat. Pigsy hums, full of pancake and vindication. Sandy carries the luggage and also the lesson, which weighs almost nothing. Tripitaka points at a distant rise, where a pagoda pricks the sky like a question mark. Your second nudge for the pocket? What one gate in your week could you walk through with gentler authority, no swagger, no apology, just a clear promise and a steady breath? Name it. Imagine the bow. Imagine the staff's quiet tap. Imagine the lions remembering they were meant to guard the way, not keep you from it. Wind at your back, paper soldier tucked safe, you go on. The sun has become a coin that life keeps handing you. Small, bright, sufficient for the next mile. By mid-morning, the road unspools toward that question mark on the horizon, a pagoda tiered like a stack of careful thoughts. The wind hangs bells on every eave. Each note is a small agreement between copper and air. Pigsy cups a hand to listen. Lunch bell? He asks, hopefully. Library bell? Sandy smiles, and you feel your spine straighten as if a teacher just walked in. Up close, the pagoda smells of cedar, ink, and warm stone. A bronze bell, big enough to marry a thundercloud, sits on a timber frame. Tripitaka bows, palms folded into a boat that floats without water. Wukong taps the bell with a knuckle. The tone rolls through your ribs like a tide returning phone calls. An old scribe appears, plain-robed, ink on his fingers, the way stars are ink on the night. His eyebrows surprise his face, then make peace with it. Welcome to the Registry Pagoda, he says. We keep lists so people don't get lost in their own walking. Lately, however, he glances at the bell. Names are not staying put. He leads you into a hall where scroll cubbies line the walls like beehives. Each cubby wears a small wooden tag. Ferries, hospices, gate gods, helpful women, things that try to eat you but can be reasoned with. Some tags tilt, as if embarrassed by how often they're needed. From a middle shelf, the scribe extracts a long, narrow roll, the pilgrim register, and unfurls it along a desk. Inked names glow like footprints after rain. Then, right in front of you, one fades, another blurs, a third slithers sideways into the margin, as if ashamed of itself. I re-ink them, the scribe says, but they keep forgetting they were written. History, acting casual, leans on the doorframe. Tang pagodas often doubled as archives, for relics, for records, for charms inscribed to guard travelers. The oldest complete printed book we've found, the Diamond Sutra, 868 CE, came from a cave library at Dunhuang Woodblock, printed, dedicatory note and all. Printing in the Tang spread scripture and travel permits, menus and medicinal lists, because once wood meets ink, thoughts become reproducible. Whether scholars still debate whether early printing aimed more at merit-making or mass literacy. A playful answer is yes. Tripitaka studies the fading letters. Ink obeys attention, he murmurs. Attention obeys care. Wukong's ears flick. So we're being robbed by something that eats care. He twirls a hair. It turns into a wolf hairbrush whose tip searches the air for a story. Pigsy uncorks a jar of lampblack from somewhere only he knows. Sandy lays fresh yuan paper, with the tenderness of building a bed. The bell trembles. From its mouth pours not sound but thin grey threads like cobwebs taught manners. They drift toward the register and drink from the names. Wukong catches one on the brush, and it writes itself into a character you've never seen, a little too symmetrical, like a coin that won't buy bread. Sir, as if. The next thread scratches Z, almost. Another becomes Wei, not yet. They hiss with politeness. Tripitaka smiles with a gardener's patience. Ah, the Bureau of As If. They file everything under later and nearly until it wears down to never. He begins to chant a verse about remembering, not to banish anything, but to assign work. The air registers the instruction like tea recognizing water. Obscure tidbit, folded like a keepsake. Tang officials maintained yellow registers, household rolls used to track labor and taxes. Some monasteries kept their own registers of vows and merit, stamped with red square seals that looked like sunsets stuck to paper. A few hill temples kept river-crossing ledgers, names of those ferried safely, names of those still owed a boat, half accounting, half prayer. Scholars still argue whether such ledgers disciplined hearts or merely decorated hope. The threads thicken, emboldened by your noticing. They braid themselves into paper clerks with narrow hats and very tidy sleeves. They bow in triplicate and present forms, titled, Reasonable Delay, Pending Courage, Signature Required, but, tomorrow. Wukong laughs softly. Stationary demons, he says. I'll file them under recyclable. He touches one with the brush. The clerk becomes a bookmark inscribed now. He taps another, it becomes here. Tripitaka adds gently. Sandy writes, together with a calligrapher's calm. Pigsy, tongue out in artisanal concentration, contributes snack first, and immediately crosses it out, replacing it with small step, which is basically the same thing but looks better on a wall. You steady the scroll with your hands, and something in your wrist relaxes, like a door remembering it has hinges. Your turn. Name one task the Bureau of As If keeps renewing in your life. If you wrote one small, honest character over it, now, here, gently, together, what would it be? Say it under your breath. Ink likes the sound of vows when they are small enough to keep. The bell hums approval. The threads lose their appetite, turn to harmless dust, and settle like pollen on the register, which holds. The scribe exhales a century. Every year, he says, we repaint the wall that says, important enough to finish. It peels fastest near the door. Wukong glances up into the rafters, where tiny wind bells are tuned to 5 notes, gong, shang, zhui, zhe, yu, the old pentatonic scale. Who tuned these? He asks. The scribe smiles. A blacksmith, with good ears, and a bad memory for prices. Obscure but true-ish. Artisans sometimes tuned bells by filing the inner lip, testing pitches against a guqin string, or a singer's tone. A few pagodas in quake-prone regions hung dragon-mouth bells that clacked when the timbers swayed a folk cousin of the seismoscope. Scholars still debate whether those warned people or simply gave earthquakes a soundtrack. Pigsy leans out a window toward a courtyard where women wash paper screens in a trough, rubbing them with rice paste and sunlight. Never thought of paper as something you wash, he says. Sandy nods. You can wash a mood too, he offers. Just don't use hot water. Tripitaka thanks the scribe with a bow that includes everyone who ever cared enough to list things properly. The scribe returns with a small bundle. A Dharani charm carved on a sliver of wood, wrapped in rami cloth dyed the pale yellow of tea. For the road, he says. It's a verse that remembers you when you forget yourself. History, again pretending to be scenery, gestures toward a stone pillar in the courtyard, its flanks carved with tiny syllables like ants on pilgrimage. In the Tang, such Dharani pillars were planted at crossroads to radiate protection, a kind of spiritual broadcasting. Scholars still debate whether people believed the sound of the carved spell mattered, or the act of carving it in stone did. Wukong shrugs. Both. We're carved by what we repeat, and what we repeat carves the street. On the way out, Pigsy bows to the bell and slips a sesame cake under its lip, the way one tips a musician. The bell accepts with a bass you feel in your teeth, which is the language of gratitude. The plain beyond the pagoda is a sheet of rice seedlings combed by light. Oxen make commas in the mud. A boy stands on a bund, like a small emperor of puddles, flying a kite shaped like a carp that stubbornly insists on swimming the sky upstream. Wukong admires the string handling the child controls drift with a patience most generals would envy. Promotion potential, Wukong says, mocks stern. The boy bows with grave silliness and offers the string. You hold it for a breath, and the kite pulls your wrist into the story of wind. Tripitaka pauses at a mile marker painted with faded cinnabar characters. West, he says, as if reminding the compass of its job. You remember the paper soldier tucked in your sleeve, and the charm in your pocket, and the way the register steadied under your palm when the name tried to run away. The world feels indexed, but kindly. Your pocket question fold it once, and keep it near the warmth of keys. What tiny ledger could you start tonight that would honor the parts of your life that fade when you're tired? 1 line a day. Not to police yourself, but to greet yourself. Titles to steal from the pagoda, helpful strangers. Minutes I was actually here. Things that tried to scare me, and then paid rent. Afternoon leans forward. Geese do their best calligraphy across the sky. The bell's last note rides the wind, until even Wukong admits he can't hear it, which is how you know it's time to walk. By late afternoon, the road narrows to a seam stitched between wheat and wind. Ahead rises a square watchtower with a wooden balcony, a drum hung under its eaves, and a signal pole flying strips of dyed cloth that snap like quick opinions. Pigsy shades his eyes. Finally, civilization, he declares. A place that believes in snacks and naps. Sandy grins. You always confuse empire with lunch, he says. Tripitaka smiles at the sky, as if it were an encouraging teacher. This is a relay station, a Tang oasis, for hooves and news. A post road like this, Shushu Jiaozuo Idao, braided the empire together, from Chang and west through passes, over ferries, past Beacon Hills. Couriers traded fatigue for speed, swapping horses at each yi, so a message could run while the man rested. An official dispatch branded urgent might cross hundreds of lerd in a day. Legend says the fastest posts were nicknamed flying horses. History fact, wearing dust, the Tang maintained a web of relay inns, fodder yards, drum towers, and beacon fires, logistics, as a kind of national heartbeat. A station keeper meets you at the gate, sleeves tucked, abacus poised, eyes like a ledger that includes mercy. Sit, she says, and the word becomes chairs. She brings buckwheat cakes, salted greens, and a pot of brick tea whose steam sounds like advice. Wukong sets his staff against the wall. It pretends to be modest, fails. Tripitaka thanks her with both palms. We're headed west. The keeper nods toward the drum. Then beat this first, she says, so the road knows your names. You climb the tower. From here the land is calligraphy, field strokes, river commas, tree radicals writing a poem large enough to sleep under. Wukong gives the drum a test tap. The sound walks the valley like a tall person in soft shoes. Efficient, he approves. The keeper explains, 1 beat for couriers, 2 for travelers, 3 to warn the next post. Most nights, she adds, we beat 4 nothing to report, so that quiet doesn't look like negligence. Obscure tidbit, the tower keeps behind its grin. Relay stations issued tallies, carved bamboo tokens, or fish-shaped metal passes to identify real messengers. Some commands rode with tiger tallies split in 2. Your half matched the state's half, or your authority dissolved at the door. In border districts, beacon towers could pass fire and smoke in coded bursts, 1 for watch, 2 for alarm, 3 for invasion, a flame alphabet shorthanding panic into protocol. Scholars still debate the true average speeds of Tang couriers and whether beacon signals formally integrated with the postal drums or just shared the wind. Records, brag, diaries hedge. Tripitaka reads the painted board nailed under the drum. Strike what is true. He looks at you the way a kind librarian looks at a clock. We'll practice, he says. Most of us ring alarms for thoughts that only look like invaders. The keeper brings a stack of message, slips thin wood, laths smoothed by thumb oil. We collect strays blown off other people's carts, she says. You sort them on the parapet. Some are official, grain counts, bridge repairs, tax schedules. Some are private, a boys' list, goats, string, forgiveness, a recipe for noodles, a vow written sideways because that's how courage fit on the day. Then come the other kind, soft, grey slips that feel warm and unhelpful. They say you're late, you're behind, everyone else has a map. Anxiety writes fast, so its penmanship is confident. Wukong plucks one such slip and holds it to the light. It turns translucent, shows its watermark. Maybe. Another reveals suppose. A third says they, but never names a single person. He laughs. Ghost memos. All CC. No sender. Pigsy tries to eat one. Sandy rescues the research with 2 fingers and a look. Tripitaka touches the drum once clear and the slips flutter, undecided. 1 beat when there is real movement at the edge of the field, he says. 2 beats when help is required. 3 when danger steps into the yard. Otherwise do not drum your own panic into a storm. Bow to it, yes. Feed it? Number. History stands behind the keeper and nods. In Tang cities, the night watch struck hours on wooden clappers or drums, calling the 5 night watches that turned the darkness into digestible pieces. After a fire in Chang'an, officials issued curfew orders and lamp rules. Time was something cities could ring into order. Scholars still debate whether that discipline made evenings safer or just quieter for officials. Every bell contains a thesis. You take the drumsticks. Below, the road lies down like a compliant sentence. Up the gorge comes a gust of dust, not raiders, just goats with ambitions, herded by a girl whose whistle can talk a boulder out of stubbornness. You hold still. The goat squadron passes, unimpressed by your restraint. Far off, a kite falls, and then remembers the sky. Somewhere, a pot lid answers a dog. Wukong watches your hands and grins. You're learning the difference between urgent and loud. The keeper pours more tea. The steam paints small bridges in the air. They vanish, but you feel crossed. She admits a scandal of logistics. We see more false fires lately, people lighting beacons for loneliness, for likes, for the pleasure of being the wick everyone watches. The next tower relays it, and suddenly the whole valley thinks a war has arrived. She points to a charred pan, where someone's vanity burned down their front stoop. Pigsy sniffs. At least it smelled heroic while it happened. Your pocket question arrives carrying a saddle. If you had to hang 1 bell in your day that you alone could strike, what would it signal? Begin. Breathe. Stop for water. Call your mother. Write the paragraph. Turn off the news. And what sound would mean, false alarm, carry on, friend? Name them now. Unnamed bells ring at random. The keeper leads you to the beacon pit, a shallow stone bowl, stocked with oily reeds, and a bundle of wolf-stung that lights even when wind objects. For weather that misunderstands, she says. Wukong raises an eyebrow. What's our weather? The keeper points at your chest. Variable, with chance of clarity. Another small history, tucked under a terracotta tile. The tea-horse road braided this region to the highlands, compressed tea-blocks marching on mule-backs, war horses clattering the other way, traders speaking 5 kinds of patience. Monasteries along the way offered lamps, ledgers, and lodging, turning commerce into corridors where prayers borrowed the momentum of profit. Scholars still debate whether tea flowed west for taste or for tax, whether horses came east for war or for prestige. Likely all 4, because history multitasks. As sun leans gold, the keeper ties a scarlet ribbon to your staff travelers registered. She paints a small black dot on the ribbon's end. Night-friendly, she says. In the dark, a dot is easier to see than a sentence. Tripitaka bows in a way that thanks all relay keepers, past and future, even the ones who forget to smile unless tea reminds them. You step back onto the road. Behind you, the drum speaks 4 measured beats the evening report. We are here, we are calm. The sound walks with you for a while, then hands the duty to crickets. Wukong balances the drumsticks on 1 finger, flips them into the pack. Pigsy hums a marching song about dumplings achieving enlightenment. Sandy counts clouds like rosary beads, loses track on purpose. Night prepares its inkstone. The horizon takes a breath. And you, less rented by hurry, more registered by care, move west. By moonrise, the road stitches itself to a gorge stone ribs, a river writing silver syllables below. A narrow suspension bridge spans the gap, planks like missing teeth, ropes humming 1 note above the water's slow applause. At the near post stands a weighing beam with brass pans, a box of standard weights, and a lamp whose flame minds its posture. A placard reads, "Crossing fee, 1 truth weighed fairly." Pigsy squints. Do they take dumplings as collateral? Wukong taps the rope, listening for dishonesty. Sandy kneels to check knots, the way some people greet old friends. A keeper emerges, an elderly woman with sleeves rolled, hair pinned by a bone comb polished by years. Her voice is a measured spoon. This bridge carries bodies and also words, she says. Both have weight. Here we charge by accuracy. She points to the brass pans. Your truth. There. If it balances, you pass. Tripitaka bows. Then we will practice being brief. History steps up with receipts. Tang markets operated on rules called Shi-Ling, market ordinances. Gongs and drums opened and closed trade, like a day with bookends. Inspectors of weights and measures kept bronze standards in offices, bowls etched with capacity marks, rods for length, stones for mass. The silver Kaiyuan Tongbao cash jingled in strings. A guan was nominally 1,000 coins, though in practice it could be 980 if your fingers were persuasive. Scholars still debate how strictly ward markets were enforced early. Tang loved order behind gates. Late Tang drifted to street markets that ignored curfew whenever appetite out-argued law. Wukong grins and drops his staff into the pan. It shrinks obligingly to a needle, tries to look dainty, fails. The beam dips, then rights itself with a quiet tisk. The keeper lifts an eyebrow that has weighed many pilgrims. Not the staff, the sentence. Wukong clears his throat. Fine, I exaggerate when bored. The pan steadies. The rope sighs, as if it has been waiting for someone to say that for a century. Pigsy steps up, pats his belly like a loyal dog. I promise to share snacks, he declares. The beam flutters, unconvinced. He hurries. Sometimes. The needle hits true. Sandy smiles into the lamplight. Tripitaka lays a palm on the brass. I fear wasting time, he says, and therefore waste kindness. The weights kiss the edge and settle. The keeper nods at you. Your turn. No poetry unless it's needed. You look across the span. The far post is a black doorway cut in starlight. The river argues mildly with stones. You consider the day's ghost memos and the drum that told you the difference between urgent and loud. Your sentence arrives like a lantern finding your hand. I mistake momentum for meaning. The beam tilts, breathes, and then levels as if it has been given something it can finally nap under. Obscure tidbit tucked into the keeper's sleeve. In certain Tang provinces, magistrates maintained honesty scales for grain tax, official balances with bolt holes sealed by twine and waxed. Break the seal, and the smallest lie leaves a scar. Some contracts included a line, "Weigh before witnesses," sign by lamp. In border posts, salt that ancient braggart needed extra scrutiny. Smuggling wore respectable shoes. Historians argue whether the empire's famous order sprang from genuine standards or from fear of inspection that worked so well the truth rarely had to appear in person. Halfway across, a paper tiger appears striped by shadow, teeth like folded fans. It paces the planks with bureaucratic menace. Pigsy yelps and grabs the rope. The bridge sings a higher note. The keeper does not look up from her lamp. Ignore it, she says. It eats only rumor. Wukong flicks the illusion with one fingernail. It buckles, recreases itself into headlines, then unthreads into wind. We should post a sign, he mutters. Big cat, small appetite. Tripitaka thanks the keeper for the lesson. She shrugs it away like a compliment she can't afford. People pay me with coin or clarity, she says. I prefer clarity, less to count. She offers a tray of persimmon slices that glimmer like small autumns. There's also this, she adds, lifting a worn measuring rod. Marks run along it, neat and permanent. I measure ropes with this, she says. I measure regret by the amount of night someone tries to sell me while pretending it's rope. Pigsy licks persimmon from his thumb, wearing the respectable face of a man who has improved. Sandy asks to examine the weights. Each is stamped with a tiny character: jud, straight, ping, level, sea solid. These, he says, are ethics disguised as nouns. The keeper laughs. Everything here is a disguise. Even the river. It looks like motion, but it's a habit dragging its feet downhill. Your pocket question squeezes your hand like a friend before a speech. If you could keep only one measure on your desk, of pages written, of minutes present, of kind words offered, of times you chose rest over rage, Which one would train your day to be truer? And which weights would you retire because they only weigh anxiety? The bridge sways. Below, the river composes a low commentary. Wukong walks backward a few steps, as if to test whether the gorge respects confidence. It does, within reason. Tripitaka studies the lamp flame. It makes a small hour inside the glass. A domesticated Sunday, he turns to you. Remember the relay drum, he says. Strike what is true, and here, weigh only what you mean to carry. History trails along with another lantern. In Chang'an's great markets, bell towers rang the 5 night watches. At the opening, vendors bowed to waits before customers. A carved board in one ward warned, false measure, 5 strokes and shame at the gate. A later chronicle grumbles that officials themselves were the heaviest false measure. Scholars still dispute whether that line is moral philosophy or a disgruntled noodle seller with a brush. At the far post, a donation box waits, the kind that invites you to practice liberty. Pigsy drops a coin and a wrapped bun with a look of daring. Wukong contributes a truth he was saving for later. I like being feared less than I pretend. The box doesn't blink. It has seen worse. Sandy, practical as a horizon, slides in a spare rope splice. Tripitaka offers a prayer that names the lamp, the river, the keeper, and the idea of enough. The keeper ties a thin blue thread around your wrist. For level, she says. Blue remembers water. Water remembers true. She takes back the measuring rod and sets it against the doorframe. The marks line up as if the world and wood agreed for once. You'll meet many bridges, she says. Pay with the lightest coin that spends the best. Attention. You step onto solid ground. The gorge becomes a story you trust from both sides. Behind you, the paper tiger tries one last sigh, then folds itself into nothing useful. The lamp at the post does a yawn, settles to a smaller halo. On the road beyond, the stars lower their voices. Wukong twirls a persimmon slice on his finger, then eats the evidence. Pigsy kicks at a pebble with the seriousness of a statesman. Sandy hums a measure that would keep any boat honest. Tripitaka walks in the middle and makes quiet look like leadership. And you, less impressed by loud weights, more devoted to true measures, carry forward a bridge that will travel with you wherever a drift pretends to be destiny. The road climbs until the mountains rub their shoulders against the sky and decide to post a gate, 2 timber towers, a crossbar with copper bells, a desk the color of old tea. The air smells of pine and a little ink, like someone's office got lost and became weather. Pigsy straightens his sash, as if cloth could argue with authority. Wukong twirls a persimmon stem into a counterfeit moustache. Sandy checks the clouds for mood swings. You tuck the blue level thread at your wrist under your sleeve and promise not to look suspicious on purpose. A clerk sits behind the desk, thin as a brush handle, beard trimmed to a thesis. In front of him, a stone seal, a porcelain dish of cinnabar paste, and a stack of paper, slips with spaces for names, origins, destinations, and intentions, always the trickiest line. He looks up with the sympathy of a man who has watched time try to cut the line. Papers, he says, kindly and without options. Tripitaka bows and produces a doudier, ordination certificate, thin mulberry paper, black characters steady as a monk's pulse, the seal of a previous capital pressed so clean the dragons still whisper. History nods. By Tang times, ordination certificates weren't just proof of vows, they were state-issued instruments to count clergy, control tax exemptions, and sometimes, during lean years, to raise revenue by selling new seats on the Lotus. Monks on the road carried passes called guandare, stamped at relay stations, Ijan, that dotted imperial roads about every 30-40 li. Scholars still debate how tightly these checkpoints were enforced. Did papers police people, or did people teach papers the flexibility of weather? Wukong leans over the porcelain dish. Cinnabar? He asks. Jusha again? The clerk brightens. It's nice when anyone cares about your tools. A paste of cinnabar ground fine with castor oil and a whisper of silk floss, he says. Holds the seal's lines so even a rumor cannot wriggle free. Obscure but true. Classic seal paste yin ni, mixed mineral red with sticky oils and fibers so the impression wouldn't blur. Some keepers swore a good paste could store a shape longer than a memory. Pigsy sets down a bundle of buns with the moral ambiguity of a gift that hopes to be a bribe wearing a hat. The clerk slides it back, equally polite. "We accept clarity," he says, echoing the bridgewoman like old colleagues who once shared a manual. Sandy produces travel tallies from the last post, little slips, stamped with a goose emblem. The clerk squints. "Ah, the goose relay. Reliable flyers, geese. They complain less than poets." He stamps the slips, then hesitates. Purpose of journey? Tripitaka breathes, truth finding its sandals, to fetch scriptures and bring them where they are needed. The clerk nods the way, a door nods to a key. Wukong opens his mouth to decorate the sentence. You place one toe on his shadow, like stepping on a friend's cloak before he sails into the wind. He shuts it with a grin that says he noticed. History opens a side drawer. The Tang relay system kept post horses and messengers on rotation so official dispatches could leapfrog across provinces. Night drums and watch bells marked the handoffs. There were rules for fresh mounts, feed, and the death glare to deploy if a county dared short you on oats. Somewhere, always, a ledger. And yet journeys also depended on favors. A friend who knew a jaidushi, military governor, a monk who knew which abbot stamped papers without waiting 3 days for debate. The clerk flips to the intentions line for you. "And you?" he asks, amiably dangerous. Your throat produces a bureaucratic poem: escort duty, support staff, encouragement technician. His brush hovers, entertained. Wukong saves you with a bow so dramatic it owes rent. "He is the one who keeps the pace humane," the monkey declares. The clerk writes that down word for word and stamps it with normal speed. Obscure morsel while the ink dries. Some frontier officers scented their paste with a breath of musk or borneol, so fresh stamps smelled official. Others dusted papers with relgar during festival seasons to deter insects and impudent fingers. Scholars argue whether that was hygiene, psychology, or both. "Any contraband?" the clerk asks. Tone light, eyes heavy. Salt, silk, unlicensed scriptures, opinions? Pigsy pats his stomach. "Only portable rain," he says. Sandy, who understands gates, empties his pouch. Rope, needle, a small oilstone, 3 persimmons cut like coins. The clerk inspects the oilstone as if sharpening were a philosophy. It is, returns it with respect. From the yard comes a clatter. A pair of Sogdian traders in bright coats argue playfully over a bale of indigo, their language gold with consonants. The clerk stamps their Hushu chit and sings back a phrase that makes them laugh hard enough to lower the price on their own pride. History waves. The Tang roads were multilingual. Markets carried Kuchian songs, Persian glass, and Sogdian letters that stitched the empire to Central Asian threads. Debate continues over how far foreign merchants settled versus circulated, but their shadow is in the ceramics and the music that learned to turn on more than one rhythm. Your pocket question coughs politely. When a gate asks for your purpose, which line do you write? Small but true, the one your resume can carry, or the one your feet will actually follow? If one stamp on your day could grant passage to anything, would you request merit, mercy, humor, or silence? The clerk ties a thin paper cord around your bundle of stamped slips. "Do not crease the seals," he says, "and do not let rain teach the ink humility." He gestures to a side altar, a simple wooden shelf with a lamp, before a travel deity so old the name fell off, and the kindness stayed. Tripitaka lights a wick, names the road and those who must use it without choice. Wukong bows, but only slightly, as if rivalry were a compliment. Pigsy adds a bun with the gravity of tribute. Sandy straightens the warning placard on the wall so the words can stand up straight. As you pass under the crossbar, a wind snatches the bells into a polite chorus. Beyond the gate, the path softens into dust, lined by pines that sketch green thoughts up the slope. Wukong flips your stamped pass and whistles. "Look," he says, pointing at a faint symbol in the corner, a tiny fish. Tripitaka smiles. "Fish tally an old habit," he explains. Once the court split a bronze fish in two, one half stayed at the capital, one rode with the envoy. Fit them together, and the road bowed. The clerk overhears and calls after you, and sometimes, he adds, we just trusted the face in front of us, but write it down anyway. The day loosens into afternoon. A water seller swings by with a pair of yokes, cups carved from gourd that keep stories cool. He takes your coin, counts it by sound alone, and miscounts in your favor on purpose. Pilgrims, he says, should be watered like trees. He gestures ahead. There's a monastery 2 ridges over, good shade, honest rice, a bell that rings like a promise. Behind, the gatekeeper's brush rasps back to work, reshaping air into records. Ahead, the bells fade to memory. Between your steps, print a small treaty with distance. We won't hurry, and you won't hide. You tuck the stamped slips into your robe with the care of someone who has lost and refound purpose, enough times to treat paper like breath. Pigsy hums a breakfast song about noodles that intend to be immortal. Sandy counts his quiets. Wukong balances the seal cord on one finger, until gravity asks nicely. Tripitaka keeps to the middle of the road, where dust and intention wear each other smooth, and glances at you, the humane pace technician, like a leader grateful for the unsung job that keeps a journey from becoming a sprint. Somewhere a drum marks the hour. It does not rush anyone. It simply names the time, then lets you spend it. 2 ridges later, the path relaxes into courtyards. Pine shade arranges itself like good manners, and a bell you can't yet see keeps time by listening rather than striking. The monastery sits low to the sloped tile roofs, like calm eyebrows, whitewashed walls, scuffed by weather into maps. At the gate a cloud plate, a bronze disc shaped like a drifting cloud, hangs beside a wooden fish. Pigsy eyes the fish as if it might be edible if negotiated properly. Wukong taps it once. The hollow knock swims the length of the corridor and returns with friends. A novice greets you with the speed of someone who has been practicing the sentence. Travelers receive shade, water, and a bowl. Virtue pays later. He leads you past a guest hall kerfun with reed mats, a refectory dayton where steam writes cursive on the air, and a little scriptorium that clicks like rain, brushes, bone rulers, breath. Tripitaka bows to the abbot, an elder whose eyebrows have memorized winter. The abbot answers with a bow that has seen emperors come and edicts go. He sets your stamped slips on a lattice tray. To dry ink needs a moment to decide who it is. History pulls out a chair. By Tang practice, monasteries along main roads often maintained guest quarters for pilgrims, envoys, and the species of traveler whose introductions are mostly dust. These houses weren't inns. Exactly. They were merit engines. Feed the road, and the road will speak well of you to the heavens. Scholars still debate how extensive monastic hospitality networks were, and whether their tax-exempt landholdings, strained state budgets, or quietly stabilized frontier logistics. The records are both pious and political, depending on who sharpened the brush. The refectory bell calls with a voice like hot water exhaling. You sit on low benches, bowls arrive, barley, rice, greens with sesame, a ladle of bean broth that tastes like a fence falling down humble and suddenly liberating. A tray of salted radish lands in front of Pigsy, who salutes it like a visiting general. Wukong folds his rice into effortless architecture. Sandy eats the way he walks measured, tied safe. Tripitaka's blessing is soft enough to be mistaken for weather. Then Lu Yu would approve of the quiet. A monk boils spring water in a squat kettle. Not too fierce. Tang-style tea comes as pressed cake shaved into the pot with a thumb-sized blade, whisked with a twig broom until the surface wears a faint foam ring. Obscure but sweet, Lu Yu's Cha Jing advised ranking water best from a mountain spring, drawn from the center of the flow, next best from a stone runnel. The river water was acceptable if you introduced it to philosophy first. The monk grins when Tripitaka murmurs the lines. He pours you the second cup. A gesture some houses reserved for guests who look like they've come a long way in all the ways that count. After the meal, the abbot takes you to the scriptorium. Low tables, mulberry paper stacked like snowdrifts of restraint, inkstones, a gold ink dish reserved for sutra headings. Lay donors, 2 old women with the posture of bells, are copying Dharani slips to be sealed inside a stupa. One writes with such patience you can hear the character settle. Printing has made things faster, the abbot says, nodding to a shelf of woodblocks, but copying still trains the part of the mind that chatty tools forget. Mainstream note, by the late Tang. Woodblock printing of scriptures, think the Diamond Sutra was already humming. Temples printed texts for devotion, fundraising, and distribution. Debate continues over whether the earliest waves were primarily state-sponsored, merchant-funded, or grassroots piety with a knack for logistics. Wukong circles a block, squinting. Who spells the Buddha correctly when the carver sneezes? The abbot shrugs. Proofreaders, he says, and karma. He lifts a finished page. The colophon lists donors, not with boasts, but with small requests, for a daughter's cough to ease, for a missing son to send a dream, for mosquitoes to show mercy on the infirm. Quirky footnote. Some Tang colophons do, in fact, dedicate merit to creatures as specific as those bitten by summer insects. Compassion has fine print, and it's beautiful. You help grind ink circular strokes, slow enough to flatter the stone. Pigsy sneaks a radish into Wukong's sleeve. Wukong sneezes and blames dust from the eightfold path. Sandy adjusts the window lattice so the light falls like a ruler across the copying line. The abbot hands Tripitaka a silk wrap for scriptures, dyed tea brown so travel dust won't panic. Covers, he smiles, are the patience a book borrows when weather forgets itself. At dusk, novices strike the wooden fish in a steady heartbeat, while a bell answers with the long vowel of evening. You join chant. The sound is less performance than plumbing voices, clearing pipes between silence and breath. Tripitaka's tenor threads the room. Your chest loosens around a knot you'd forgotten to name. Wukong hums the harmony that mischief makes when it decides to help. The abbot offers lodging and a small chore in exchange. Wukong ends up repairing a roof tile with one hand, while telling 3 novice legends about the moon. Pigsy volunteers in the kitchen, heroically rescuing dumplings from loneliness. Sandy tends the path, tamping loose stones so Nightfeet will remember trust. You're assigned to the library loft, where you reshelve bundles by title cords, little cloth tags embroidered with the first 4 characters, so the wrap remembers what it holds. Obscure detail, some libraries scented their cloth with borneol or agarwood. The faint medicinal spice keeps moths shy and minds attentive. Your pocket question climbs the ladder with you. When you're offered shelter in exchange for a small vow, which vow builds you quiet labor, steady study, or the promise to carry a story forward without improving it to death? Night deepens to ink. The courtyard lanterns write circles on the flagstones. In the guest hall, a traveler's altar holds a clay lamp. You add a pinch of oil. Above the lamp, a faded votive print shows a guardian whose eyebrows double as bridges. The caption, half lost, says, "May roads be long enough for learning and short enough for kindness." The abbot meets you at the threshold with a small packet wrapped in yellow paper. "Saffron and ginger," he says. For stomachs that don't like maps. He tucks in a tiny clay seal, impressed with the temple's fish emblem. If a checkpoint is hungry for authority, show this to remind it that merit travels too. He winks. Authority often respects a wink it can pretend not to see. Before sleep, he tells one more history that feels like a riddle. In certain years, the court ordered censuses of monks. Shaving heads counted as if hair could be a tax category. Some officials sold ordination papers to refill grain stores. Some abbots refused, and some cooperated to keep kitchens lit. "We keep records," the abbot says, "so the future can misunderstand us more accurately. You file that under advice, and schedule it to make sense later." You lie down. The mat is thin, which turns out to be generous. Thin mats let spines remember they were once trees. Pigsy snores like a large animal trying to turn into a flute. Wukong dreams with one eye open. He says it saves time. Sandy sleeps like a harbor, quiet even when ships come in. Tripitaka breathes a small, continuous blessing that may be your favorite weather. Somewhere in the complex, the wooden fish beats the midnight watch. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't lag. It does the simplest miracle. It keeps time without stealing it. Dawn rinses the tiles, steam from the refectory lifts, like notes that forgot their staff. The abbot sees you off with travel jokes that are just blessings in disguise. If you must argue with your sandals, they will at least take you somewhere. He tucks a slip of paper in Tripitaka's sleeve, temple seal, spare merit, and bows exactly as deep as a road requires. Wukong bows back just as deep, then pockets an extra radish from Pigsy's stash for spiritual emergencies. Sandy shoulders the packs with tide-level calm. You count breaths not for magic, but to remember you've carried air farther than any map. The path unspools toward a river, the kind that makes valleys into alphabets. Willows write green cursive. Silt bars spell the word maybe in a dialect only cranes can read. A ferry gong sounds a flat, ringing plate, then a ferryman's shout slides across the water like a thrown rope. His raft is stitched from goatskins, inflated tight as winter cheeks, lashed beneath a plank deck polished by thousands of anxious shoes. Mainstream note: on the Yellow River and its cousins, leather bulb rafts and reed coracles ferried traders, monks, and officials for centuries, cheap to make, loud to doubt, surprisingly good at not dying. Scholars still debate how widely such craft were regulated by the state versus farmed out to local clans who owned the crossings by ancestor and rumor. Pigsy stops at the bank and remembers he hates water. It's not fear, he clarifies. It's courtesy. Water likes respect. Sandy pats the raft. Then respect it with your feet. Wukong drags the raft closer with a bamboo pole and a grin. The ferryman, a walnut of a man with a tattoo that looks suspiciously like the river itself, squints at your party's papers. Tripitaka offers the temple slip and the ordination tallies he carries in a silk wrap. History aside, Dudai, state-issued ordination licenses doubled as travel protection for clergy in Tang times. Checkpoints liked stamps, the way geese like formation. Debate continues on how strictly these papers were enforced outside core prefectures. The countryside often ran on who vouches for you, rather than which office owns your soul. Crossing fee is 3 coppers and 1 name, the ferryman says. River likes to know who is tickling it. Tripitaka smiles, offers Xuanzang, and bows to the current. Sandy nods, says Xiaowujing, lowers gravel. Pigsy teases the water with Zhu Bajie, rumor enthusiast. Wukong flips a coin and says nothing. The ferryman shrugs. A silence is a name the river already knows. You step aboard. The raft answers with that drumskin creak you feel in your knees. A novice taboo floats up from memory. Don't whistle on boats unless you're trying to order wind. The ferryman burns a twist of mugwort, letting the smoke draw a little charcoal door in the air for things that should not come aboard. Obscure footnote. Across North China, boatmen used mugwort, rooster feathers, or river sand charms to remind local spirits to mind their side of the contract. Folklore is just civil code printed on leaves. Halfway out, the current fattens, greedy as rumor. The raft yaws. Tripitaka's sleeve dips. Wukong plucks it dry with a pinch of cloud. Pigsy yelps and sits. Sandy plants the pole and becomes a clause the river must obey. Deep breath, Wukong says lightly, not because breathing helps the raft, but because panic pays the river twice. You try it. The river, bored by this lack of tribute, relaxes into being merely large. A shout from the far bank. Checkpoint. 2 officials in summer hats, paper stiff, waiting beneath a frame of river cane hung with talismans. One holds a tally board with slots for tokens, the other examines arrivals the way cats examine promises. They're after contraband, salt without permission, cloth dyed the wrong rumor, scriptures of questionable orthography. Context. Frontier posts collected tolls and verified cargo grain, salt, iron, texts pinched by the state for revenue and order. Mainstream historians note the Tang courier system, Yijan, could move edicts faster than gossip, less mainstream but delightful. Some posts kept a pet crane as a good luck auditor. Scholars still argue whether rural posts served primarily as security, revenue sponges, or community theaters for the empire's favorite play, We Are Watching. The raft noses in. The paper hat pair glance at Tripitaka's raps with the flinch of men who've once been scolded by a scripture. Declare, says Hat One. Food, tools, texts, says Sandy. A comb, 27 radishes, and 1 attitude, says Pigsy. Wukong offers his smile, which looks like contraband even when it isn't. The official pries open the scripture pouch, inhales the Borneol scent, and shuts it as if the smell might convert him. Pass, he says, then frowns at the temple seal tucked beside the licenses. This is a fish, he says, suspicious. A very holy fish, Tripitaka replies, and the ferryman coughs mugwort smoke of timing. The official decides he has always respected aquatic clericalism. You pay the toll 3 coppers and a thin handful of millet for the shrine box. Quirky detail. Some posts took water money, a small side donation earmarked for repairing the riverbank. Whether it ever met a shovel is a separate genre. Wukong flips a stray coin into the current. For silt management, he says, the river accepts. On the far shore, the world resets. Donkey bells like pleasant arithmetic, a market strip brewing the day, steamers exhaling buns, a broom scribbling the threshold of a stall, a barber's clamshell razor catching first Sunday. You pass a table where an old woman sells fairy charms, stamped with stamped waves and the character for return. She presses one into your palm. Payment refused. You have the look of a story that comes back, she says. Wukong tucks the charm into your sash. Pigsy buys 3 more for culinary research. You pause under a waymarking pavilion, the kind with a map carved like a tidy lie. A courier horse snorts at the bronze bell. A child repeats your names to memorize how travelers should sound. Tripitaka notes distances the way gardeners note rain enough to matter, not enough to rule. There, Sandy murmurs, pointing to a ribbon of stonework marching upslope. Old bridge footings. When the empire remembers a valley, it leaves ankles. History aside, many mountain crossings used pilings and trestles rather than full arches. Where money thinned, the state left half bridges for local clans to finish with rope, plank, or prayer. Debate lingers on whether this was strategy or forgetfulness promoted to policy. You climb. Cicadas tune the ridge. Their orchestra plays July. Wukong whistles on land it's legal and tells a lower hill to pretend it is already behind you. Pigsy proposes a restful discourse on dumpling topology. Tripitaka counter-argues with mindfulness of feet. Sandy mediates by finding spring seep under ferns, thumb-dammed into a cup of cold clarity. You drink. A small, useful joy expands behind your ribs. At a saddle between peaks, you find a shrine. 2 stones, one larger, both flanked by flagging ribbons bleached to wisdom. The inscription is brief, Bridge of Yearning, and the offering bowl holds exactly 4 things: a copper, a hairpin, a date pit, a postage-thin scrap of paper that reads, "Arrive well." Pigsy deposits a radish, immediately regrets, then leaves it anyway. Wukong balances your fairy charm on the lip. A charm on a bowl is a promise that knows gravity, he says, sounding for once like a monk who escaped being a monk by inventing a better mischief. The trail drops toward terraces like pages fanned by a careful hand. Farmers step between seedlings with priestly precision. Water clocks somewhere count without faces. Tripitaka pauses, turns, bows in the direction of the monastery you can no longer see. You follow his bow. The air bows back. Your pocket question pads up quietly. When a river asks for one of your names, which do you give, the one the world can stamp, or the one that keeps you buoyant? Afternoon warms into a briar of light. You reach a copse of scholar trees. Pagoda tree, says the part of your brain that likes footnotes. Camp is the correct size. Rice, tea, and the permission to stop improving. Wukong gathers windfalls like he's interviewing them. Pigsy roasts a sweet potato to the color of applause. Sandy strings a line for damp sleeves. Tripitaka copies a verse and lets the ink dry at its own pace. You stare at the charm. The character for return looks less like a command and more like a door that opens inward. Night arrives with the tact of a learned guest. You listen for river talk. It answers with distance, which is sometimes kinder than advice. The stars are misprinted tonight, one bright, out of place, insisting on its own footnote. Wukong notices, grins, and says, "The sky has errata, we forgive it." You sleep. By noon, the trail braids into a road, and the road remembers it was once a post route. You can tell by the way milestones stand, like retired soldiers who still insist on perfect posture. A low compound appears, a square of mud brick wrapped around courtyards. A relay station, Yijan, with a gate so practical it's almost shy. A wooden board lists distances in tidy brush. Next station, 30 li. Mountain pass, 106. Capital, always the capital, measured not in li, but in longing. A bell clacks. A boy in hemp rushes to take the dispatch tube from a courier whose horse breathes like opened bellows. The horse's mane is tied with thin red cords, fire signal colors, because speed should look like speed, even when it stands still. Mainstream note: the Tang courier network chained the empire with horses, runners, riverboats. Posts like this swapped mounts, fed messengers, stamped documents. Scholars still debate how far monastics could lean on this infrastructure without official errands. Some say ordination licenses opened doors, others that doors opened mostly to seals that rattled when shaken. The station keeper bows, the bow of a man who knows by your dust which province you have argued with. Tripitaka offers the temple seal and his quiet. The keeper returns a sleeping room key carved like a small fence. Fifth bay, east wall, he says. Wind goes there to read. He squints fondly at sandy men who carry well, recognize each other across centuries, then at Pigsy, whose nose has already found the kitchen. Wukong has found the roof. How? No one bothers to ask. Inside, the station is half stable, half paperwork. A rack of bit registers hangs beside a wall map, strung with red thread roots like veins, mountains like bones. A clerk uses a split bamboo tally to score arrivals a click for each hoof, an extra click for important shoes. Quirky detail, some posts kept ledgers not only for horses but for hoof patterns, noting, left 4 white sock, right ear nicked, because the state trusted animals as much as men. A horse who matched its description could travel farther than a man whose story didn't. On a side table, a teapot keeps the first promise of afternoon. Cups tattoo the wood with rings of patience. In the forecourt, a message drum, really a hollow log, sleeps on trestles for evening signals. The keeper touches it like an old colleague. Used to mean flood, bandits, or wedding, he says. These days it mostly means come eat. Pigsy approves this improvement in civilization and volunteers to audit the kitchen. The cook, a woman with wrists like temple bells, laughs and sets him to rinsing greens. Every saint begins with a bowl, she says, which is either a proverb or lunch. You explore with your eyes first, which is the correct way to explore. The sleeping bay is spare plank beds, a paper window tempering sun into music, a peg for each traveler's name. Wukong slides your fairy charm onto the peg. The character for return winks like an inside joke. Sandy unties packs with the care of someone untying yesterday. Tripitaka kneels by the window, copies a verse, lingers on the brush's lift where emptiness carries the stroke forward. History aside, copybooks from relay clerks and monks sometimes share paper in the archaeological record. When ink fades, the hand remains. Scholars still argue whether style reveals province or teacher more reliably. Your opinion, both, plus whether. In the stable yard, a farrier whittles a pegged shoe to fit a stallion that thinks highly of itself. Wukong admires the horse's arrogance as a professional courtesy, then scratches its forelock in a dialect reserved for champions and scoundrels. Pigsy emerges with a tray, post noodles glossy with vinegar and pepper oil, a crock of pickled radish, slices of bean curd that have seen things and survived. I negotiated a research position, he announces, which appears to mean tasting panel. At a side table, 2 letter writers hold court calligraphers for hire, who translate feelings into the correct number of characters. A widow dictates a message to a son apprenticed upriver. A soldier pays for a line that says bravery without burdening his mother with worry. You watch words become bridges. The paper is thin, but the span feels real enough to walk. One scribe nods toward Tripitaka's brush. Monk's hand, he says. Square as a promise. He offers to stamp your letters with the station's seal. An inkfish, of course, still swimming in its circle. A runner lopes in, sandals flapping like polite applause, bearing a flag tube striped red and black. The keeper unplugs it, reads a slip, and sighs in 3 languages. There's repairs needed on the North Bridge, and bandit rumors on the South Slope, not orders so much as weather. If it worsens, we drum, he says. Until then, we cook. Wukong offers to scout by cloud. The keeper waves him off. Clouds report only to poets, he says, which is another proverb disguised as a boundary. You nap the kind of nap that air freights the soul back to baseline. When you wake, you can tell the hour by the kitchen. Steam says late, ladles say nearer. Pigsy has made friends with a copper ladle and possibly intends to elope with it. Sandy has repaired the frayed edge of a halter using a sailor's splice. The knot looks like a sentence that will never end badly. Tripitaka has written the same line of scripture 3 times, each slower than the last, like lowering a bucket until the rope finally touches water. Evening convenes in the yard, around a rough traveler's table, where eating and storytelling share a serving spoon. A peddler from Hebei sells needles and tin charms shaped like door gods. A broom maker reminds everyone that a good broom is quietly political. The keeper sets the drum upright and raps it once. Not alarm, invitation. Tell it. Someone says to a man whose coat has the salt, seller's bluish dignity. He shrugs. Men who carry stories like coals pretend they're just warm by accident, and begins. Last month a white fox came to the ford and bought passage with a carp, not a fish, a coin cut like a fish, with an eye you could thread. The ferryman took it, of course. He bought a jar of vinegar with it, and said the vinegar smelled like plum blossoms where there were none. That night, the bandit captain on the South Road found his pockets full of river pebbles instead of taxes, and in the morning, the South Bridge didn't creak anymore. Make of that what you will, he grins. I will make crossings of it. Foxes fix infrastructure now, Wukong mutters happily. Finally, some decent governance. Tripitaka smiles the way a lamp smiles at a moth that insists on not dying. The table hums. Someone mentions a scholar who wrote himself so carefully he vanished between lines. Someone else swears by a shrimp spirit who audits ledgers better than magistrates. Footnote for the gentle skeptics. The border between folk compact and state capacity was always thin. Relay posts hired whatever worked, from night watch gongs to neighborhood gods. Scholars still debate whether such syncretism stabilized order or merely decorated it. When the moon finally remembers to look like itself, the keeper brings out the station seal and stamps each traveler's slip with a crisp red fish. For your paper footprints, he says. He stamps your ferry charm too, just above return, like a wink in lacquer, so the next post knows you are officially on your way. You linger by the gate, where a message cord dangles, pull twice for messenger, thrice for water, once for jokes. You pull once. The keeper produces a cliché so old it's actually new again, and everyone laughs because road humor is really about surviving another mile. Before sleep, you stand in the yard and look up. The out-of-place star from last night is still out of place, the editorial mark of a sky that refuses to rubber stamp itself. Wukong joins you, hands behind his head. Question, he says softly, more friend than trickster now. When a station asks your purpose, do you answer with the job your body does, or with the shape your heart hopes to leave in the dust? He doesn't wait for an answer. Good questions are roads. They work even when you walk them silently. You close your eyes, the drum breathes, horses mumble their hay into forgiveness, paper dries on a sill. Somewhere a fox pays a toll in exact change. The night stamps your travel slip with a seal you can only see in the morning. By the time you reach the western foothills, the air has a different weight, like someone traded oxygen for oven heat. Your robe clings. The horizon ripples as if the world itself is breathing too fast. Sun Wukong shades his eyes with one furry hand and sniffs. Huayan Shan, he says, the flaming mountain. The syllables feel like a match struck on your tongue. The stories were not exaggerations. From the plain rises a long spine of rock, blistered red, and veined with black glass, as if a dragon once slept here and forgot to turn off its furnace. Heat blows in steady gusts. The wind itself is burn-scar hot. Pebbles crack like tiny eggshells under your sandals. A hawk wheels, thinks better of it, and glides away. Tang Xuanzang Tripitaka presses a palm together and bows to the ridge. All obstacles are teachers, he murmurs, which is the kind of comment that makes sense only if your eyebrows aren't currently singeing. Sha Wujing tightens the cloth around the canteens. Zubaji fans himself with both ears and invents a proverb on the spot. When the mountain is too hot, the wise man naps. He looks around, hopefully for confirmation. No one votes yes. You try to step forward. The heat says no. It's not personal, it's physics. Updrafts push at your chest like a bully. The road west disappears into mirage. In another life, this would be the moment you cancel plans and text a polite excuse. In this one, you keep looking because the map says the path goes straight through. Wukong squints at the glazed rock face. We need the banana leaf fan, he says, like a chef announcing the missing spice. He explains, half bored, half delighted, to play tour guide that the fan belongs to Princess Ironfan, wife of the Bull Demon King, a couple who treat grudges like family heirlooms. With the right flick, her fan can extinguish 100 leagues of fire. With the wrong mood, she can raise a wind that blows pilgrims into next week. Zhubaji perks up at the mention of a princess. He smooths his tunic. I will negotiate, he volunteers. You resist the urge to clap a hand over his mouth. Xuanzang inclines his head. Remember humility. Baji nods, which is not the same as remembering. The four of you skirt the mountain's flank to a ravine, where black pines grow like stubborn ideas. At the far end, a mansion shimmers tile like beetle wings, doors lacquered the color of coals, a banner snapping in a wind that clearly exists only for dramatic effect. Two demon retainers guard the path. They look like nightmares you would politely apologize to for waking. We seek an audience, Wu Jing says, tone neutral, posture large. The retainers exchange glances, then part. Her Highness is in a receptive mood, says one, which could mean anything from, she's feeling generous, to, she wants to practice sarcasm. Princess Ironfan sits on a dais under an awning of silk that glows like sunset. She is beautiful, the way a polished blade is beautiful. The famous fan rests across her knees broad as a sail, edged in cloud motifs that, if you stare too long, seem to move. Xuanzang bows, Wu Jing bows. You bow and try not to drip on the carpet. Bajier sweeps into something between a flourish and a pratfall. Wukong bows last, with the complicated smile of someone greeting an old chess partner who once flipped the board. We require a small wind, Xuanzang says gently, a merciful one. The princess opens a palm. And what will you offer me, monk? Advice? I have 100 lanterns full of advice. Her voice could carve fruit. Baji clears his throat. Perhaps a song? He wiggles his eyebrows. This goes over as well as daylight at a bat convention. Wukong steps forward, staff planted like a measuring rod. Let us be direct. Lend the fan. We will return it. The princess eyes him. Monkey King, you taught my husband new forms of contempt. Why should I lend anything to the architect of my inconveniences? Wukong tilts his head, unsentimental. Because you, like us, are stuck. This mountain burns your gardens every 7th day. You pretend you prefer the red light. He gestures toward the distant ridge. But your servants keep buckets near the kitchen door. A muscle in her jaw considers this. The fan shifts, metal whispering. Clever, she says. Annoying, but clever. Xuanzang's gaze is steady, unarmed. We all travel west in our own way, he says. Your Highness, we seek only a breeze for a path of mercy. The princess stands, fan tipping. Mercy, she repeats, like a rare spice she once tried, and decided she might tolerate if prepared correctly. Very well, a test. She points the fan at Wukong. You, restless one, stand where I tell you and do not move. If you can keep still through 3 sweeps, the fan is yours, for 1 day. You feel Wukong's energy tense, a violin string before the bow. He nods and steps into the sunlit square, the heat visibly shimmering over him like invisible bees. The princess lifts the fan and drops it once, twice, thrice, each sweep a broad arc that drags wind out of silence. Heat wobbles, then thins, pebbles hum. Wukong stands so still you start to wonder if stillness is a form of battle. After the 3rd pass, the princess lowers her arm and offers the fan. The fabric of the world seems to exhale. Zhu Baji claps. I could have done that, he says, which is adorable in a way you cannot fully endorse. You take the fan together, Wukong's hands sure, Xuanzang's hands reverent, your hands surprised by the coolness that runs along the frame. Back at the ridge, Wukong plants his feet. Ready? He asks, already grinning. You nod. He sweeps once. The fireline dims to copper. He sweeps again. The mountain's breath falters. He sweeps a 3rd time, and the flames kneel. A corridor of livable air opens, shimmering but true. The road west appears like a sentence you finally remember how to read. As you walk into the cooled passage, the heat still whispers from the sidewalls, anger not gone, only guided. You think about the princess's test, and Wukong's stillness. If you were to borrow a power like this, what would your test be? Could you stand still long enough for your hottest emotions to pass without pulling you into their choreography? Pause here with me. When you're scorched by envy or fear, what is your version of keeping your feet in the square? Halfway through the corridor, a dust devil dances across your path, cute as a kitten, bright as a sparkler. It tickles Baji's ankles. He shrieks and pretends he didn't smiles into his sleeve. Xuanzang murmurs a sutra that sounds like water on iron. The mountain groans once, a deep settling, and then grows quiet. You make the far side just as the light slants toward evening. Behind you, heat begins to rise again. Balance, not conquest. Wukong hands the fan back later with a nod that says, both thank you, and don't try anything. The princess receives it with exactly the amount of grace she meant to. As you descend into cooler air, the smell of pine returns sharp, clean, earned. The first star nails itself above the ridge. The path west curves like a good sentence into the dark. Morning comes on like silk poured over stone. The flaming mountain shrinks behind you into a red memory, and the trail loosens into plains where reeds whisper and cranes step like careful thoughts. You smell river, a sweetness braided with mud, and then you hear it, the rise and fall bustle of a city, gates, flags, market voices braiding into one warm rope of sound. The sign above the gate is in a script you don't quite know, but your mind supplies the meaning the way dreams do. The kingdom of women. The characters shimmer as if written on water. Wukong rolls his shoulders as though he's heard this music before and is deciding which steps not to dance. Zhu Bajie straightens his belt and practices an expression that he thinks means respectable and actually means adventure pending. Sha Wujing checks the straps on the packs. Tang Sanzang offers a small bow toward the unseen palace, a courtesy to whatever order lives here. Inside the gate the air changes again. Color everywhere, saffron banners, indigo cloth, lacquer red doors that catch the light like fruit skins. Women manage the stalls, the patrols, the processional drums. Girls chase kites shaped like fish. Old women sit in doorways, sewing with the confidence of someone who has outlived many kinds of trouble. You realize, with a pleasant jolt, that no one stares. You are not the event. This city has practice at being itself. A delegation arrives, fast but not unfriendly. Officials with lotus-stitched sashes and eyes that see what they need to see. Welcome, travelers, says the chief, whose voice sounds like water over a flat stone. Custom requires that guests drink at the spring of the child. She gestures toward a pavilion ringed with carved birds. Wukong coughs into his hand. Custom also allows for exceptions, he says with a grin that shows a little tooth. The official's eyebrow makes a small, exquisite arc. Exceptions are the second rule of hospitality, she says. The first is clarity. Here is the clarity. The spring gives more than it takes. Drink, and your body may respond with a sudden bloom of caretaking, an ache to begin, to shelter, to bring forth. In the old tales, this becomes instant pregnancy, a comic turn with consequences, but the women here say it differently. It is an invitation, the chief explains. Not a command. She watches Xuanzang, who stands still as a bell before a strike. Zhu Bajie is already leaning over the pool, cheeks reflected in the water like two friendly moons. Wukong plucks his ear and steers him back. Maybe sip later, the Monkey King says. Preferably after we are not on a sacred mission with deadlines. Wujing thanks the official with the grace of a bodyguard who also moonlights as a diplomat. They guide you through streets that smell of sesame and wood smoke to a shaded court. The queen appears, carried in a canopy woven with gold thread that flashes when she turns her head. She regards your company, monk, monkey, river saint, pig, and you with the practical curiosity of someone who has fought floods and budgets, and knows which is harder. We keep our own laws, she says simply, but the West is due reverence. What do you require? Xuanzang bows, a day's rest, provisions, and permission to continue, untroubled. The queen considers, then nods. Granted, with a condition, a question. She gestures to a pair of stone benches. Everyone sits, even Wukong, who treats chairs like suggestions. Tell me, the queen says, if a life is balanced on duty, where does tenderness live? She is not smiling. It is not a riddle so much as a scalpel. Xuanzang folds his hands. In the same home, he says, duty without tenderness grows brittle. Tenderness without duty dissolves. The road asks both. The queen's eyes soften by a degree. Acceptable, she says. And rare. You spend that afternoon among the city's quieter rooms. A scribe shows you a wall of records, births, treaties, rainfall, 1,000 steady lines of ordinary glory. Here's your mainstream history note for the night. Many travelogues from the Tang through the Ming mention rumor kingdoms ruled by women, sometimes satire, sometimes aspiration. Far to the west, Greek writers told of Amazons. Nearer home, early Chinese chronicles claim the Nuguo, the country of women, beyond difficult rivers. Scholars still debate which folktales seeded which chapters of Journey to the West. Did the novel borrow older matriarchal myths, or did later storytellers paint this episode with their own wishes and worries about gender and power? The footnotes argue. The streets here just keep working. A tiny oddity. In the tax ledgers, you notice entries where citizens tithe not coins, but promises, 2 mornings of gate duty, 8 jars of pickle, 1 poem for the midsummer festival. Value measured not only in grain but in belonging. You feel something in your chest, unclench, a hinge, finding oil. Baji returns from the market with an armful of skewers and the expression of someone who has lost count but thinks it will be fine. They gave me extra, he reports, though the grease on his chin revises the math. Wukong wanders back, eating 3 plums at once. Wu Jing has acquired, somehow, a new spool of thread for mending straps. Xuanzang moves among them with a relieved smile that you don't get to see often. At dusk, lanterns rise from the courtyards in slow constellations. The queen invites Xuanzang to walk the parapet. You drift behind with Wukong, who eyes the horizon like it owes him a rematch. Not staying? You tease. He snorts. I'm a poor guest at parties where the music is responsibility. Then, softer. Also, the bull demon king once tried to date the queen's aunt. History makes rooms awkward. On the wall you pause at a shrine where offerings are written on slips of mulberry paper, weighted with smooth stones. Some are prayers for harvest, some for mothers in labor, some for sons learning to cook without burning the roof. One note is simply a sketch of a house by a river. Wu Jing lingers, fingertips brushing the air near the stones, as if reading their temperature. Before you sleep, the chief official returns to the guest court with a bowl of the spring water, cool as moonlight. For your hands, she says, not your throats. You rinse. The water leaves your fingers tingling, as if you borrowed a skill from your future self. In the quiet, consider a question with me. If there were a spring that awakened your instinct to shelter, whom would you protect first? Someone you love, a part of yourself you keep postponing, or a stranger who knows how to ask? Which choice would be duty, and which would be tenderness? Dawn finds you at the gate again. Provisions stacked, canteens full, a small basket of sesame cakes for the road that insists on second breakfast. The queen raises a hand. Xuanzang returns the salute. May your scriptures be both heavy and easy, she says, which is a prayer only a ruler knows how to make. The chief official lifts a cord, and the gate answers like a throat clearing. You walk out through air that smells like rain, finally deciding to keep its appointment. Behind you, drums begin a slow pattern, not a warning, a benediction. Wukong hops once to test gravity, grins that grin, and starts west without looking back. Baji lingers at the thought of sesame cakes, then follows at a trot. Wu Jing adjusts his pole as if aligning a compass. Xuanzang turns once more and bows a gesture to a city that told a true thing gently, that power can wear a softer face and still be strong. Beyond the fields, the road narrows into brush where cicadas gossip loudly about your chances. A magpie lands on a branch and tilts its head as if to say, next test inbound. You don't doubt it. The kingdom's walls fall away behind you. The plain opens like a blank page. You step onto it, and the page begins to write back. The path pulls you into hills that smell of pine sap and sun-warmed rock. By noon, the air is a bright thread you could almost pluck. By evening, it cools into silk drawn over the skin. Silk, you think absently right before the road proves it has a sense of humor. The grasses begin to glisten oddly. A twig brushes your sleeve and clings. Wukong's ears tip forward. Web, he says, in the tone of a locksmith hearing the wrong kind of click. You crest a low rise, and there it is, a ravine laced end to end with shining lines, each strand thick as fishing cord, draped from pine to pine in layered curtains. At the far side glows a cave mouth like a lantern. Somewhere a flute is playing sweet, playful, the kind of tune that has talked travelers into worse decisions since music was invented. 7 figures appear in the cave light. Silk moves, and you realize it's sleeves. 7 women step along the web as if it's a marble floor. robes rippling like poured milk, hair combed into constellations. Their laughter lands like dew. Zhu Bajie's spine lengthens 2 proud inches. Wukong's staff lengthens 3 impatient feet. Sha Wujing doesn't move except to place himself a fraction closer to Xuanzang, whose face is doing that disciplined cloud expression that means the weather inside is unsettled. Holy monk, the foremost woman calls, voice warm as honey on rice. The path is dangerous at night. Will you rest in our poorhouse? Poorhouse is a phrase that, here, includes jeweled lanterns and a threshold of polished stone visible through the cave. Wukong squints. His gaze goes not to faces but to shadows. He doesn't like what he doesn't see. Baji executes a bow with many moving parts. Ladies, he says, we would hate to impose, but we do not wish to be impolite to hospitality. Wukong taps the end of his staff on the ground, the universal sign for, I will be the bad cop, and I will enjoy my work. Xuanzang's hands fold. Where there is kindness, we do not assume harm, he murmurs. Where there is desire, we do not assume truth. Wukong murmurs back. You cross the nearest skein carefully. The silk hums underfoot like a plucked zither string. Inside, the cave is cooler than the dusk. Platters arrive, peaches with skins that glow like a secret, tea that smells faintly of new rain, cakes dusted with sesame. The 7 hostesses drift and settle, and conversation curls like smoke. They ask the sorts of questions that make you feel seen. Are your feet weary? Does the wind slice at the joints? Do you ever wonder if the scripture you seek is the permission you need to stop seeking? Xuanzang answers with courtesy and guarded warmth. Wukong answers with jokes that test for echoes. Baji answers with yes. Here's your mainstream history note for our night walk. Spider imagery crawls all through East Asian literature as metaphor for ensnarement of lust, of vanity, of the mind catching itself. In late imperial China, though, the spider also earned a homely blessing. The happiness spider, Siju, dropping on its thread, punning with CZ joy and Ju Zu. Pearl, a creature of ambivalence, omen and trap, luck and lesson. Scholars still debate how Journey to the West calibrates that ambivalence in this episode. Is the satire aimed at ascetic hypocrisy, at social suspicion of women with agency, or at desire itself? Which will borrow any available costume? Footnotes spin their own webs. The cave spins better ones. The third cup of tea is when the room tilts. You feel it like a soft tide pulling at your ankles. Your eyelids begin to value gravity. Xuanzang's breath lengthens. Wu Jing's gaze hardens almost invisibly. Wukong laughs too loudly at nothing. It's a signal. A fine vintage, he says to the air. From the year of plots. The 7 smiles ripple. Just a draught for sleep, says the first. We watch over guests. We are very bad at being watched over, Wukong replies, and his staff is suddenly a line of gold across the floor. The cave shifts costume. Silk sleeves harden to spined legs. Lamp glow cools to star cold. The sweet music thins to the whine of tension across many threads. The 7 women are 7 spiders, now magnificent, yes, monstrous, no creatures, doing as creatures do. The web lifts at the edges of the room. Somewhere deep behind your ribs, an old reflex twitches. Run. But there is nowhere to run that isn't strand. Baji shoulders his rake with a noise like a barn door swinging open. With respect, he says, to the nearest arachnid, I have a rule about dinner. I prefer not being it. He sweeps. Wu Jing anchors. Wukong moves like punctuation, comma, dash, full stop. The web sings. Xuanzang does not panic. He closes his eyes and chants, and the sound is a small fire in a rainy field, steady, warming, stubborn against wind. You feel your breath align to it, and against your ankle, the silk's tug becomes a suggestion you do not take. A strand slaps Wukong's wrist. Another kisses Beiji's hat off his head. That was uncalled for, Beiji says with wounded dignity. Wukong twirls his staff, and it blurs into a wheel of dawn. One spider lunges. Wu Jing levers her sideways with a motion as spare as calligraphy. It is not carnage. It is boundary. 2 of the spiders pause on their high threads, considering. Holy man, one calls. The voice now, 3 notes and a needle. You walk through the world collecting vows like trinkets. Do you ever wear them? Why fear a house that asks you to rest? Xuanzang opens his eyes. Because rest that does not restore is another trap, he says simply. The web stills, listening. He bows not to appease, but to acknowledge that hunger is honest, even when it is not kind. Wukong flashes you a look. Time to end the dance. He taps the staff twice. A spark jumps. Just enough flame to singe, not enough to scorch. The threads nearest your feet let go with tiny sighs. The spiders recoil, not in pain, but in recognition. Fire is a boundary no web can rewrite. We will leave without malice, Wukong announces. You will hunt elsewhere tonight. The monk is not your meal. His shadow is already busy feeding him lessons. The ravine exhales. The silk slackens like a harp after a song. You back out slow. Slow is the only way that doesn't invite a chase. Outside, the sky is doing that late blue thing that makes silhouettes look like decisions. The seven shapes linger at the cave mouth, neither banished nor welcoming, an audience for the road's exit line. As you walk, you find a strand still clipped to your sleeve. You peel it away. It holds the memory of stickiness, and wind it around 2 fingers, then pocket it. Here's the quiet, odd tidbit for your collection. In some villages, people once kept spider silk bundled near doorways to test the weather. The way the threads tightened at dawn could hint at coming rain. A web is a forecast, so is desire. It tells you which direction the air inside you is moving. Let me ask you, on this darker stretch between lanterns, when your own web glitters likes, praise, a flirtation with a consequence, can you tell which parts are hospitality and which parts are hunger? And if you can't yet tell, what small flame would you trust to show the difference without burning what's good? Moonlight takes the trail in its cool teeth. Baji retrieves his hat from a bush, pats it back into a hat-like shape, and hums a song about almost being soup. Wu Jing ties off a frayed strap with thread from his new spool. Xuanzang thanks the night aloud, which is a habit you might borrow. Wukong walks at the edge of the path, eyes still scanning, but his tail, when he thinks no one is looking, flicks once in contentment. He enjoys a clean escape. Behind you, silk shivers and goes quiet. Ahead, you hear impossibly far, yet distinct, the dull thunder of something large, turning in its sleep. Mountains, perhaps, or fate, rolling onto a new side. You fasten your pack and keep going, aware of your own threads, and which can be cut, which must be carried, which you are still learning to weave into something that feels like a road. Morning lifts like a scroll being unrolled. The road loses its thorns and becomes a pale ribbon leading to a mountain that wears clouds like prayer shawls. A bell you cannot see rings with the exact calm of water settling in a bowl. Wukong shades his eyes with one hand, the casual salute of someone who has bent heaven to his timetable before. Baji cinches his belt, as if courage lives in the extra notch. Wu Jing checks the rope that binds your bundles. It has never once failed. Xuanzang's palms come together, and, for a heartbeat, the world seems to take a step closer, so it can hear him breathe. At the mountain's foot, a river shines too clear, like truth you didn't expect to arrive so early in the day. A raft bumps the bank with the politeness of a guest. The ferryman is more shadow than man, transparent around the edges, like an old promise. "Your fare?" he asks softly. Wukong taps his ear. "Paid in steps," he says, "and in the number of times we did not set something on fire we really wanted to." The ferryman's mouth considers a smile, and decides against it. He gestures you aboard. The raft slides as if the water is pulling it from beneath, not pushing from behind. Midstream, the wind quiets until you can hear your own pulse turning pages. Xuanzang looks down at his reflection, and for a moment you see not a monk, but a child with a cicada shell in his hand, listening to the emptiness to see if it will sing. You catch Wukong looking too, face unreadable. He is never more protective than when a friend remembers he used to be fragile. Here's the mainstream history note we promise to keep carrying like water. The real Xuanzang 7th century pilgrim, polyglot, logistical genius crossed deserts and kingdoms to reach Nalanda in India, studied Yogacara under Shilabhadra, and returned to Chang'an with hundreds of scriptures on palm leaves. He produced the Great Tang Records on the Western regions, a document so practical you can smell the camel sweat, and so luminous it reads like a dream walking. Scholars still debate just how much Yogacara, theology, mind-only, perception-tinted reality shaped Chinese Buddhism through his translations. and how much the novel later wrapped those ideas in fur, gold, and jokes. What the debate agrees on is this: the road changed the monk, and the monk changed the road for everyone after. You step off the raft onto stone so clean, it feels like a standard you suddenly have to meet. Gate after gate yields to silence and sandals. The monastery ahead, Thunderclap, the place where enlightenment is a weather event, looks smaller than you expected, and bigger where it matters. Gold doesn't scream, it glows in the tired parts of your eyes. A novice with a smile like a moon sliver bows, vanishes, and returns with elders whose age sits on them, the way a hawk sits on wind. There are formalities. There are questions asked in phrases that don't bruise. There is tea that tastes faintly of smoke and distance. Then comes the moment you have been walking toward for so long, the idea of stopping is almost frightening. A lacquered chest arrives. A seal breaks. Xuanzang lifts the first sutra with a reverence that makes even Wukong hold his grin an inch behind his teeth. The pages are blank. The blankness is not an absence. It is a presence so plain it rang the bell in your ribs before your eyes caught up. Wukong's eyebrows do a small, acrobatic performance. Bagan coughs into his fist hard enough to make it a group activity. Wu Jing looks at the elders as if to say, "We are good guests, but we are not fools." Xuanzang's face does not collapse. It opens, like a door that was always waiting to be used. The eldest elder inclines his head. "Wordless teaching," he says. "The Dharma that does not need marks. It is an answer that has fed people and starved them for centuries." Wukong clears his throat loudly enough that a cloud flinches. "With respect," he says, "our king did not send us to carry weather. We need letters that make sense to cooks and kings. Wordless truths are fine, until someone asks you where page 1 went." The elder's eyes hold a smile his mouth has forgotten. A second chest arrives, smaller, older, heavy like frankness. This time the pages bloom with ink, characters neat as orchard rows, commentaries winding between them like irrigation, palm leaf granaries of thought. You feel your shoulders loosen, as if a door inside you has been unbarred from both sides at once. Here's the odd little tidbit for your pocket. Some accounts of later copy halls in Chang'an describe boys who blew gently on wet ink to help it set a soft chorus of breath above lines about the emptiness of self. Scribal wind. And here is the scholar's still argue note. Whether the novel's wordless sutra gag is pure comedy, a jab at ritual that forgets people, or a koan with teeth meant to ask you privately, if the pages had stayed blank, would you still have considered the journey complete? You decide which answer hums. Xuanzang bows until the bow becomes a shelter. Wukong rests the staff across his shoulders so casually it's practically a vow. Baji has already picked out his favorite lunch spot for the return trip. Wu Jing organizes bundles like a man who knows that holiness without logistics is a wish. The abbot touches Xuanzang's sleeve. "Going back," he says, "is not the same as going away." The sentence lands with the weight of furniture you've owned your whole life, and only now noticed as beautiful. You begin to understand why so many pilgrim stories spend so little time at the destination. Arriving is just a lens. The seeing is the thing. When you step outside, the mountain has tilted a degree toward afternoon. Thunderclap is behind you, but not absent. Wukong walks a stride ahead, as he always does when the way is known, but the mood requires leadership with jokes. "Blank pages," he says, chuckling. "Imagine if we'd carried them 1,000 miles home. The court would have called it minimalism and built a museum." Baji laughs loud enough to scare 3 doves. Xuanzang smiles in a way that forgives the world for being funny and hard at the same time. Let me ask you, as boots find their old rhythm, if someone handed you a book with no words and swore it contained everything you needed to live well, would you learn to read with your hands? Would you listen for ink in the way your days touch other people? Or would you say, like Wukong with impeccable manners, "Thank you, but I also require vowels"? You descend. The river accepts you again and returns you unchanged looking, which is the cleverest kind of change. At the far bank, the road home appears, pretending it was always simple. Somewhere behind you, bells ring like a soft correction. Thunder doesn't clap, it nods. Here is your last mainstream note for this long walk. When Xuanzang returned, he didn't hoard the texts. He built a scriptorium of hands, a nation of ink. He translated for years with teams who argued footnotes into futures, meaning survived in copies, and people survived by making the meaning copy into them. Maybe the most faithful miracle of the novel is that its jokes kept that memory warm. So you shoulder a sacred weight that is also light. You do not hurry. You don't have to. The blankness you met will travel with you, companion to the words. When night comes, you will read by a small fire, and notice you are not reading alone. Now the road softens under your feet, the way pillows learn the curve of a cheek. The packs are set down. The staff becomes a walking stick, then a tent pole, then a line drawn in sand to say, enough for today. Somewhere, a kettle negotiates with silence and wins. Steam lifts like a small ghost that never wanted to haunt anyone, only to be seen and given a warmer name. You breathe in 4, out 6. The stars take their old positions as if they never doubted you'd look up. Wukong hums a lullaby that pretends to be a joke. Beiji snores in a key that livestock would respect. Wu Jing ties one last knot that will hold even in dreams. Xuanzang turns the blank page once, twice, 3 times, as if to make sure you hear how quiet can turn into scripture when handled gently. Let the tent flap move, like an eyelid. Let the night carry your questions without needing to answer them yet. You have walked far, farther still, waits. But for this hour, you are exactly where the road meant you, to pause between word and wordless, between effort and rest, between the person who began and the person who is beginning again. Close your eyes. Keep the small fire. The mountain keeps you. The story continues without asking you to chase it. When morning arrives, it will find you already home enough to greet it.